Introducing Addy, a game-changing AI maintenance bot for property management. Addy can, in any language, triage and data capture every maintenance issue, with full voice version coming soon. Addy has learned from over 850,000 reactive maintenance issues carried out by AddyUvo, the leading maintenance call handling service. To sign up for updates and our next testing cohort, go to adiuvo.org.uk/ADI.
Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Julieta Moradei, managing partner and the newest member of the Overlay Capital team. Julieta and I took a slightly different format with the Propcast today, digging into her story, how she found herself in construction and then VC, and what has shaped her experience in the space to this date. Construction is an industry where women are still in the vast minority, making up for only 11% of the workforce. As the founder of Women in Contech, we dig into DEI trends that are being seen in the space and how construction is evolving to be more equitable for women. We discussed why construction has been a later industry to adopt technology and what types of construction technologies have been the most successful in the 2023 macro climate. If you're looking for a holistic and insightful conversation surrounding the growth of the sector and predictions for 2024, don't miss out and tune into the Propcast this week. Hi, and welcome to the Propcast. Today we have a bonus episode with Julieta Moradei from Overlay Capital. We will be discussing the construction tech space in a little bit more depth and understanding her new venture with the team. You might have noticed that I am not Louisa, who usually hosts our Propcast every week, and that is because she is in Riyadh at the Cityscape conference. But Julieta, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, look, you must be really excited to announce that you've just accepted a role with Overlay Capital. So congratulations. With you in play, I know that they're going to launch their built environment fund, more specifically focused on the real estate, climate, and construction space. So tell me a little bit more about yourself then. How did you get into the scene in the first place?
Yeah, so my journey into the world of the built environment is actually quite different. I started off in the world of engineering, then moved to entrepreneurship, then venture capital, investing, and now doing a mixture of both investing and consulting. So taking a step back, the way that I actually became almost obsessed with the built environment is I grew up in Argentina and moving around. By the time I was 10, I've already lived in 10 different cities. And so for me, being able to experience how different cities make you feel from a really young age is something that made me really passionate. And so I remember when I was about 8 years old, I was living in Barcelona and I was obsessed with Gaudi. Like I preferred to go to Park Güell instead of anywhere else in Barcelona. And at that age already, I knew that I wanted to be an engineer and an architect like Gaudi. I wanted to be this master builder and do both the design, the creative, and the engineering. And so for undergraduate and grad school, I did structural engineering and architecture. And in the US, it's actually quite different to do both degrees, but I want to be able to kind of merge the two together and be this grandiose master builder. And what's interesting is I started off my technical career as an engineer at Disney. And so at Disney, I was trained as a designer to be very creative, very innovative. I was working on the Avatar project in Orlando, and we were using technologies like virtual design construction back in 2013. So Disney was this incredible pioneer for the adoption of construction tech. And that's how I was trained. So that's how I thought the world worked. And when I went later on into different career paths within engineering, I realized that within the world of construction, it's actually not the case necessarily. It's a very under-digitized sector. And so after grad school at Berkeley, that's when I started actually diving more into working on sites in San Francisco for tech clients like Facebook, Google, Apple. And it really boggled me that, you know, as tech firms have endless budget as they're building their campuses and their tech firms, they're not necessarily using technology for their sites. And so that's when I started itching at, you know, who out there is doing tech for construction? What is construction tech? And so at the time I looked at the Y Combinator batch being in San Francisco, and there was only one that really jumped out at me out of the entire batch, and it was a nonprofit. And so they actually built housing in Central and South America using construction technology. So I joined them and launched an R&D program. And that was really my first step going from engineering to entrepreneurship. And that's when I realized that in order for you to actually be able to adopt technology in the space, you need to have a catalytic pilot project. And that's exactly what we had. We had these communities of housing. We were able to bring things like 3D printing and new materials and software to our communities and test them. iterate the technology in third world countries where it's a little bit easier to bring in new tech, and then really showcase to customers, to investors that this thing works and the impact that it could have on a financial ROI perspective, impact ROI. And that's where I became really interested in kind of this intersection of technology with construction. But the biggest issue then was there was a lack of funding. So within the world of VC, it's really been in the last 5 years that we've seen a surge of VCs specialized in construction tech and more startups in the space. And so that's how I ended up launching a fund through this R&D program, entered the world of venture capital. That's a whole other story, but absolutely love being an investor. And then from there, realized that there's actually a very big lack of adoption on the customer side, so from developers and owners. And that's what kind of brought me towards Overlay, which I'd be happy to share more about later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, really wanting to ask you a bit more about Overlay, your background and investment, that kind of thing. But I guess before we get into that, it's really interesting. I think both construction and real estate are some of the oldest industries globally that we have, yet the latest to adopt technology. And I guess from your experience and what you've seen, why do you think that is? Like, what is the real drive towards that lack of adoption?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get that question a lot, especially because, everyone knows this graph that McKinsey published in 2018 that showcases all the different industry verticals, and the least digitized sector at the very bottom of agriculture and farming. And right above that is construction. It's one of the largest markets in the world in terms of its value, yet least digitized. And what I see on my perspective is there's amazing developers out there. There's amazing contractors that are very innovative. The thing that's very difficult is the adoption piece, because you have to change your entire structure operationally on an incentive perspective, but also the regulatory body. The construction industry, AEC, architecture, engineering, construction, is very siloed. We have many, many stakeholders. And so actually bringing in technology, doing the adoption, takes a lot more legwork than in some other industries. So I don't think it's that there's a lack of incentive to actually adopt technology. I think there's very creative and innovative people out there. And there's not a lack of technology either. There's actually a surplus of startups right now in the construction tech space. There's an unmet demand. There's a lack of adoption because of all these other barriers. And so, we're in Las Vegas right now. We could actually see some amazing structures out there, like the Ferris wheel. That was a project that was done by Arup and incredibly innovative. But we have to start from scratch and really use first principles versus technologies that could automate a lot of that design. And again, I think it comes down to the adoption barrier. And I think a lot of the adoption side is because of, the regulatory side, the operational side, but also a culture shift. I think in the construction world, there's kind of this culture of I've always done it this way. So why would we change it? Why would we go through the risk of the regulatory hurdle, of safety hurdles? Why would we go through that to just bring in technology? And day to day, we have so many different things going on. We're working so many hours on site. We don't have the time to be really focused on bringing in this technology. So that's what I've been incredibly passionate about for the last few years, is focusing on the adoption barrier, which I think is the number one issue we have in construction. And that's kind of what led me to Overlay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess when speaking about that adoption part, I've worked with another VC recently, who I won't name, and they have an EIR program with a top GC in the space. And I think their kind of opinion is why they've launched this program is to really realize some of their ideations, which they feel are perhaps more developed than a lot of these early stage construction tech businesses. I think there's a feeling from them that there's a lot of feature products being made and not necessarily platforms and kind of built out holistic product suites. And that's why maybe they feel like there's been a lack of adoption past that maybe like Series B point where people get a little bit stuck. So, is that a notion you agree with? What's your opinion on that? And do you think that there are any startups challenging that perception?
That's a great question and an amazing observation. I think in the space of construction tech, there's a lot of point solutions. And what I mean by point solutions is if we look along the construction value chain from conceptual design through pre-construction, construction execution, post-construction, there's a lot of solutions that target a very specific problem. And now the issue is how do we integrate all of them into one platform seamlessly? People don't want to be purchasing 30 products a month that are SaaS products. It's very difficult to integrate everything together, especially when the majority of people actually use a platform like Autodesk and they want to make sure everything rolls up to that one platform they're using. And so I think the issue of these point solutions is what's leading to, right now, actually BuiltWorlds released an article last week, I believe, that talks about how most startups are not able to attain past a Series B or within their revenue attain past a 5 to 10 million ARR because they're point solutions and there's a lack of adoption. And so we're seeing a lot more PE firms come into the play. and purchase a few of these point solutions, and then create platforms, create a roll-up structure. And so we're seeing a lot more of that, which is an interesting play. But I think what's going to be even more interesting is solutions that are integrating together and bringing a lot of these point solutions together, or programs like what Autodesk is doing through their integrations program, which is how do we get these plugins? A lot of these startups have plugins to an Autodesk. How do they all interact together? And I think that's where it's going to get interesting in the next few years. But I still think today we have to get more adoption on these point solutions first, because the industry is just at the early innings of adoption. If you look at those adoption curves within innovation, we hit kind of that peak of the early adopters, and now we're in that valley before we get to the mass public. So those point solutions are kind of those baby steps or the low-hanging fruit before you get to the full integrations. And so I still think that there's a lot of room for the startups that are point solutions to make it big before we get into the full roll-ups.
You know, it's interesting. It's always great talking to you because having been in the VC side for the last few years and then experiencing it yourself, you definitely have a unique pulse and place in the market. So really, I guess let's go to that VC part now. So what made you transition into VC? You know, what's your experience been like there? And how did you feel that translated from your prior experience into that VC landscape?
It was very serendipitous. I never thought that I would be in the world of finance or being a VC, but it all kind of makes sense because I'm so passionate about finding founders at the early stages and really incentivizing them to scale and helping them, coaching them. I think that's so incredible. And I think the passion that I bring into it from the technical perspective is that as an engineer on so many job sites, I've faced the issues myself. So a lot of times I could have been that customer. And I think that as a VC, being able to bring that level of empathy towards any founder when they're pitching you to when you invest in them and you're helping them scale, I think it's really imperative to have kind of that empathy towards the solutions as a customer first. And I actually, with most founders, the top advice I give them in the early stages is customer discovery. You never have enough time for customer discovery. Interview people as much as possible. So I like to kind of bring that angle into it. But your question was around, how I ended up in the VC space. And it was when I launched this R&D program within the nonprofit for housing, my role was really to find external technologies, not reinvent the wheel. We're not going to be the best at creating technology in-house. Let's find all the different technologies out there and then bring them to our job sites in our housing communities in Haiti, El Salvador, Bolivia, Mexico, and actually test them and be able to showcase to the world that they work on a structural level, on a reliable level, safety level, all the things, and their financial ROI. And so after a year of doing that with R&D program, it was more of an accelerator kind of in a job site. What I realized was there's a huge lack of funding. A lot of these startups, especially ones that are hardware, material science, ones that require more patient capital, they were not able to raise because there's not enough VCs in the space that just focus on construction tech. And so this was, 2017, 2018, early innings of, the VC community investing in construction tech. And so because of that gap of funding, that's where we realized we need to make sure that there's a fund out there that just focuses on construction tech at the earliest stages and has access to these pilot projects, has access to be able to bring these startups to these communities or places, create partnerships with pilot projects, whether they're developers or owners, and actually scale them. Through that VC experience, I learned a lot about how to find those amazing founders, how to actually back them and bring more into the ecosystem for fundraising. But I realized that piece of the pilot projects, that piece of the founders after they've already fundraised, after they've closed a round, being able to go in front of customers and scale, that piece is what I call the missing middle, which is there's a very big barrier of adoption of technology. It's the number one barrier that we were talking about before. And there's this kind of surplus of technology now and an unmet demand. And so my biggest goal right now is fixing that missing middle by increasing the demand curve.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I'm sure that missing middle, you could write a whole thesis on it. I'm sure that there's a lot to say on that topic for sure. I guess another thing that's really important to mention as well is, you've obviously launched Women in Contact, which has been a really amazing platform to see expand. I'd really love to hear a little bit more about that, share that with the folk listening today, a bit more about that platform, how that's evolved, and what the real core goals are in doing that.
So Women in Contact is a community that we want it to be the number one community globally for women that are founders, that are investors, adopters of technology within construction together. So it's basically a one-stop shop that if you want to find another female in the space, that's the number one area that you can find it. And the biggest vision that we have for this is truly to form deep relationships and not just connections. So many times as women, whether you're a founder, an investor, an adopter, you go to these conferences that are VC or conferences that are construction tech, and we're statistically non-existent. When you're combining a world like construction that has very, very low diversity, and then you merge it with VC, also very low numbers, you merge them together, it's very rare to have women in this space. We are seeing it grow. But the main thing is you go to these conferences and our goal is not for you to share 100 business cards. It's really form deep relationships with this community. So how do we do that? Through actual gathering in person. And so Women in Context started in 2021. And it basically started with a little idea with Antonia from Hilti. She's the director of technology at Hilti. And when we were sharing deal flow, right? Within VCs, we share deal flow, we do co-diligence together, we co-invest together. And I realized there was not many women in the space, of course, makes sense. And so he said, why don't we try to create a little group where we could get the investors together? And so we were in San Francisco. We thought there'd be quite a few of us because we're in Silicon Valley area. We reached out to everyone and there was 5 that we could find that were just focused on construction tech, very niche. So we went to Blue Bottle Coffee and there was a big round table with 10 seats and we were just 5. So we're like, hey, our goal by next year is to make it to 10. Let's fill this table. So it was very grassroots. We just started this community called Women in Contact. And the idea was we want to make sure that we could have little pods wherever there's a lot of tech hubs and have women just meet on a quarterly basis in person. Within a year, this grew to hundreds of women reaching out to us being like, I want to join this community. I've been in construction for a decade and I've never found this kind of community here. And so it's been so grassroots where women have become global and regional leaders. And now we have women in every continent practically, and it's growing so fast. We have over 600 in our community in less than 2 years. And we've had great partnerships with certain conferences like BuiltWorlds, here at Blueprint. LMRE has been an incredible sponsor of ours and just has been so helpful in terms of bringing more women together. And so I'm really excited for just more women to be connecting. And I think it's incredibly important in the world of construction tech scaling at the rate that it's scaling, that it's a really opportunistic time for women to come in and make a financial difference in their lives, but also bring in a different voice. I think that's really important because it's an industry that's very new. And so we have a lot of opportunity to impact in a different way.
Well, look, I know we obviously have a long way to go still, right, in terms of DEI initiatives, particularly for women in construction and VC specifically. So, over the last few years, what kind of evolution have you seen with those initiatives in mind across the space? And what trends do you predict to really take full flow over the next 18 months?
I think because it is such a new space and a lot of women that come in from more of the technical background like myself, in structural engineering, or I know a lot of women that were PMs at construction firms, the VC industry is attractive to them because they don't necessarily want to be on a job site every single day, or they don't want necessarily those hours that they've had on job sites. So it's an attractive space for them to be in. And what I've seen, and I can't share any numbers, this is more just a personal anecdote, is every conference I've been to, I keep seeing more and more women, early stage founders, VCs, adopters that are leading their teams. So for example, at Blueprint, I have met probably equal amounts of women and men founders, and that's just so exciting to me. And so the trend that I'm seeing is I think as it's an opportunistic time to come into our space, more women will come in. And so again, the biggest goal that I have for Women in Contact is to make sure that our voices are heard and women are interested in the space. There's so many women that I meet that are working at a construction firm. They're like, I have no idea how to go into the VC community. It's a very, very hard industry to go into. Or I've had this idea for a startup for years, but I have no idea how to become a founder. Is that something I could do? And just being able to share anecdotes together, it's like more women are interested in entering this space. And so I think for me, it's more, I hope that every single year that trend continues, where at these conferences, I'm seeing more and women come. And one day we'll be 50-50. Like my hope is that every single panel, every single speech will be 50-50 women.
Definitely. Well, look, I guess this brings us nicely to what you're doing now with Overlay Capital. So, what really attracted you to the Overlay team above all else? What was really the selling point for you as an individual? And tell us a little bit more about the build fund that you'll be setting up there.
Yeah, so I just joined 3 weeks ago, so I'm incredibly excited to be joining the team. So what really attracted me to Overlay is at my previous fund, I was focused specifically on housing, affordable housing. And what I've been passionate about my entire life is the entire built environment. So when I think about the built environment, I think about absolutely everything that touches our urban fabric. So it's construction tech, it's prop tech, it's climate tech, it's even ag tech could be incorporated into there. And so I was looking for a fund where I could really touch the entire built environment. And something that I did my master's thesis on was around sustainability, circular economy. And so I was also interested in kind of incorporating the intersection of construction tech with climate tech, especially because construction as an industry is the most responsible for carbon emissions globally. It's responsible for 40% of carbon emissions. People always think about energy, transportation, it's construction. And because it's the least digitized, they're not changing anytime soon in terms of what they're doing for sustainability. And so I was looking at a few different funds. What really attracted me to Overlay is that they have more of this platform play. So Overlay Capital is an asset manager that focuses on the built environment and sustainability. So how do we decarbonize the built environment? And they have several different strategies. So they have an innovation fund, energy fund, infrastructure fund, and I just launched Build, which is the fourth fund. And really the focus of Build and what was kind of my biggest selling point was focusing on the missing middle. So you were saying I could write a whole thesis on this. I've had this thesis of the missing middle for almost a decade. And it really came to me when I realized within the VC community that even though we're investing or backing these founders, who is really focusing on the owner side, the developer side, on the unmet demand? How do we actually increase the demand, get beyond that 5 to 10 million ARR, that all these startups are having this massive glass ceiling above their heads? And so with Overlay, when I met the team and they were just ecstatic about this idea of the missing middle and gave me this opportunity to join and really double down on this thesis, that's when it was a no-brainer. And so what we're doing is we're basically focusing at the beginning on consulting owners on this missing middle by increasing the demand side. So what that means is finding owners that have a massive real estate footprint in the country. So think university campuses, big tech firms that have campuses, stores that have the warehouses, the data centers, actual stores that you go to. So very big real estate footprint and large owners that, Fortune 500 companies that have these lofty ESG goals for 2030 and 2050. And they're just trying to figure out how are they going to attain their decarbonization goals by 2030, not just by purchasing carbon credits, but by changing their operations. So we're targeting those owners. I'm excited to share that we just closed our first client who's a Fortune 100 company. So we're going to have a massive footprint with them. And the idea is we'll be consulting on digital transformation and change management. So it's not just saying, let's analyze your problems along the construction value chain and then suggest startups to work with. We're actually going to pick the winners of these startups and then bring them into the organization and help them with change management. So along their operational level, how do we actually incorporate this technology to de-risk it, but also create an incentive structure within the team? At an exec level, what kind of resources do we provide? At a junior level, how do you provide incentive structures for people to not just burn out by bringing in new technology and working extra hours, but really a system towards bringing it in, testing it, and then actually measuring the impact on a financial perspective? Are you reducing your costs, your time, increasing your sustainability goals? And then being able to report on it on a company level to actually roll out the technology, but also to the industry. How do we get not just these big players for owners, but also SMB to start adopting technology? And so focusing on consulting, but also Overlay, we're investors, so we will to actually back some of these companies. And the idea is over time being able to really double down and invest on these technologies that have a massive footprint in terms of scaling construction tech opportunities.
I mean, it's a really interesting model, and it definitely sounds like it provides that extra level of benefit and support for these companies in their kind of earlier stages. So definitely very exciting to hear more about your evolution as time goes on as well. But look, Julieta, thank you so much for making the time today. I'm sure that a lot of people will have a lot of questions. Feel free to join Women in Contact. I believe it is an open platform. I'm sure a lot of people will be very interested in joining you guys. And I know you do events and stuff with the team, right?
Yeah, so for Women in Contact, join the community. We have a website, womeninconstructiontech.com. So please join our community there. We have a LinkedIn as well. It is founders, investors, and tech adopters. Any woman that's in the construction tech space or is interested in joining the space. And we host events in all major cities in the US, in Europe, in South America. And so we are always hosting events every single quarter for people to meet each other in person.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much, Julieta. Thank you so much for making the time this morning. Really appreciate it. And we will see you again, hopefully at this booth next year to discuss more about the evolution of what you've been doing, of what the built environment has been doing, and more importantly, what the VC space is saying.
We will also be in New York together next year.
Yeah.
So we're going to have great opportunities to discuss there. So much fun.
So much fun. So much fun. Thanks, Julieta. Look, have an amazing conference. I'm sure I will see you a lot. Really excited to see what the next year holds.
Thank you so much to Anne-Marie for having us, and we'll see you next year.
See you next year. Bye, guys. So you've never watched The Matrix. I was about to ask Julieta, we just had a quick break, and I was about to ask her Matrix Blue or Red, but she's never watched it. So
I don't know what blue or red means.
So, okay, Matrix is basically like, we're actually all like a program, and like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't reality.
So
we're
Black
just like
Mirror.
plugged into a game.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's like, it's basically like
robots versus people, and they're trying to save the world from the robots. I'm really sorry for anyone listening to this if I'm really butchering how to explain the matrix.
You're not making me want to watch it very much.
So basically, the blue pill, they tell you that this other world exists and you're actually living in a false reality. And then you can take the blue pill and then you forget everything. You never know you had that conversation and you just go on living your life as you are now. Or the red pill is you take the red pill and you continue knowing about the fact that you're in a program and you join the team behind the game and help them like beat the robots and get everyone out of the system.
Oh, definitely red pill. 100%.
I mean, I would like to think I'd say red pill, but I don't know if I've actually got the stomach to do it in the end.
Have you ever, wait, why the stomach?
As in, like, I just feel like it'd be kind of scary, you know. Like my life right now is fine, you know.
But you want to create change. Like you'd want to shift things up.
She's way more inspirational than I am.
Have you ever had a dream where you know you're dreaming? Like your
like
body,
a lucid dream, and
exactly.
you can like make decisions in your dream.
Exactly. Then you can get out of it too. You could wake up.
Yeah. So I always so apparently you can't die in a dream. So you can't.
Yes, you can. You could definitely die in a dream.
Apparently you can't die in a dream, so you always wake up just before you die. So when I was having a lucid dream and I really didn't like it, this is really morbid. If I was having a lucid dream when I was younger, because I used to lucid dream all the time and I really didn't like it, what I'd do is I'd find something like a mountain and I'd just like
jump into
like
it,
eagle dive off
so
it. And
I think you would like the red pill because I think it's like that dream. Like you're in control of your dream.
Right. Yeah.
I think so. I think we're team red.
Thank you for helping me understand
You're
myself
welcome.
today.
That's what this podcast is for, actually.
Well, yeah, that is the end of our little saga for today. Julieta, thank you for joining me. Really appreciate your time. I think personally the most meaningful question in this whole thing was the red or blue pill.
I agree. And we're both on the same team, so I love that.
Yeah, love that. Red team. But thank you so much for joining me. Really excited to see you around this conference as well. I will definitely come over and hear a bit more about what the rest of the team are doing as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.